At 22:30 hours local time on July 2, 2025, deep within the shadowed tree lines of the Donbas region, a Ukrainian Vilka-M rocket crew believed they were the hunters. In reality, they had just become the prey. Within the next 6 minutes, a routine strike mission against a Russian ammunition depot would transform into a brutal race against time, physics, and incoming high-explosive retaliation. The four-man crew had positioned their launcher to strike the strategic Kartitsk logistics hub. Targeting data was nearly complete when their passive warning receivers suddenly erupted with alerts. A powerful electromagnetic signature had appeared on the spectrum. A Russian Zhukov-1M counter-battery radar, operating roughly 38 kilometers to the east, had locked onto them. Inside a climate-controlled command vehicle, the Russian radar operator had not merely detected the launch platform. His phased array system was already calculating the Ukrainian launcher's exact coordinates with a margin of error under 30 meters. The mathematics of counter-battery warfare are brutally precise. Russians smirch multiple rocket batteries connected to that radar network operate with a standard reaction time of less than 4 minutes. Once fired, their massive 300mm rockets travel at nearly 1,200 meters per second. That meant the Ukrainian crew had fewer than 360 seconds before their exact grid square would disappear beneath a storm of cluster munitions. The crew chief immediately ordered emergency launch procedures. Every second spent entering targeting data was a second stolen from their survival. The Vilka-M system positioned beside them was far more than a modified Soviet relic. It represented the cutting edge of the Kyiv Design Bureau's domestic missile engineering. Each 800-kilogram missile carries a 170-kilogram penetrating warhead, specifically designed to destroy reinforced concrete bunkers and hardened infrastructure. But the real sophistication lies in the guidance system. Every missile uses a triple redundant navigation suite, combining standard GPS signals, Russia's GLONASS satellite system, and a high-grade inertial navigation unit. Under ideal conditions, this allows the weapon to achieve a circular error probable between 10 and 30 meters, even at maximum range. Precision of that level, however, comes with a heavy operational cost. Normally, uploading encrypted flight paths and targeting coordinates from the hardened military tablet into the missile's onboard computer takes approximately 3 minutes. Tonight, with a Russian counter-battery radar actively painting their position, that timeline had to be compressed to 90 seconds. At 22:32 hours, the electronic warfare environment changed instantly. Russian forces began aggressive GPS jamming, flooding the battlefield spectrum with interference across multiple satellite frequencies. The gunner's tablet flickered violently as satellite locks disappeared one after another. He was forced to switch into manual coordinate entry mode. Without satellite verification, he had to trust the pre-surveyed launch position, accurate to within 5 meters. A small error here would not just mean missing the target, it would mean wasting a $4 million missile while inviting a counter-battery strike that was already racing toward them. At 22:33 hours, thermal sensors mounted on the launcher's perimeter defense system detected faint heat signatures rising from a location 32 kilometers to the northeast. The Russian Smerch batteries had fired. The physics of artillery duels are unforgiving. Those rockets were already airborne, following ballistic arcs that would intersect the Ukrainian launcher's position in approximately 4 minutes. The Vilka-M's automated loading system is a mechanical masterpiece, capable of preparing and firing one missile every 20 seconds. However, thermal safety limits usually enforce a 45-second interval between launches to prevent the launch tubes from warping under extreme heat. Tonight, those rules meant nothing. They had 30 seconds. At 22:34 hours, the first Vilka missile erupted from its launch tube. The solid rocket motor created a towering 40-meter column of fire, instantly visible to every sensor within a 50-kilometer radius. The launch plume effectively broadcast their exact position across the entire battlefield. The crew never watched the missile's flight. The gunner had already initiated the second launch while the driver pushed the heavy 8x8 transporter's diesel engine into a violent roar, preparing to move the moment the final missile cleared the rails. Ukrainian doctrine demanded relocation within 90 seconds after the first launch. But tonight, mission priority overruled survival instinct. They had to fire the entire magazine. The second missile launched at 22 hours 34 minutes and 30 seconds, adding another massive infrared signature to the battlefield. By now, the Russian Zhukov radar had refined the Ukrainian launch position to within an almost terrifying 10-meter box. Final targeting corrections were already being transmitted to additional Smerch launchers. Then the crew chief heard it. A distant, rising whistle. Artillery crews know that sound better than anything else. It means you have less than 30 seconds to live. At 22:35 hours, the third Vilka missile screamed into the sky. The shockwave shattered the windows of an abandoned farmhouse 200 meters away. Thermal stress fractures began appearing along the launcher's protective coating as heat from rapid-fire launches pushed the system to its absolute limits. But the machine held. One more missile remained. The driver pushed the engine to 2,200 revolutions per minute, hand hovering over the gear selector. 30 seconds later, the fourth and final missile blasted from its tube. At the exact same moment, the first Russian Smerch rocket slammed into the ground 400 meters north of their position. The explosion shook the earth violently. The 30-ton launcher lurched forward, crashing through dense underbrush as Russian cluster submunitions rained down on the empty clearing they had occupied seconds earlier. The Ukrainian crew had just exposed themselves to every Russian sensor within 100 kilometers. But 4 precision missiles were already racing toward Kharkiv at 1,100 meters per second, completely indifferent to the chaos they had left behind. At 22:40 hours, the lead Vilka missile descended through 8,000 meters of altitude, entering the deadly engagement envelope of the forward Russian air defense network. Inside the missile's nose, the onboard flight computer was working relentlessly, recalculating navigation updates 50 times every second, while simultaneously analyzing the powerful jamming signals trying to corrupt its guidance systems. Within 60 seconds, this slender metal projectile would either deliver its warhead precisely onto the target or become just another expensive casualty in the brutal electronic warfare battle raging over the Donbas. As the rocket crossed into Russian-controlled airspace, its triple redundant guidance system immediately detected a dramatic collapse in the GPS signal-to-noise ratio. The jamming was severe. Russian electronic warfare units had created a dense electromagnetic barrier specifically designed to strip precision weapons of their accuracy. But the engineers in Kyiv had anticipated this exact scenario. Within 500 milliseconds of losing satellite lock, the Vilka-M's onboard guidance computer seamlessly transitioned into pure inertial navigation mode. Its fiber-optic gyroscopes, completely immune to external jamming, continued measuring every subtle shift in velocity and orientation, with astonishing precision, drifting less than 0.2 degrees per hour. Meanwhile, 28 kilometers ahead, a Russian Tor M2 air defense combat vehicle detected the incoming threat on its surveillance radar. The operator leaned toward his display as the target descended through 6,000 meters at supersonic speed, well within the system's engagement envelope. The Tor's fire control radar activated immediately. Its phased array antenna concentrated nearly 600 kilowatts of radio frequency power directly onto the Vilka-M's radar cross-section. Lock-on was achieved at 22:41 hours and 15 seconds. The Tor M2 represents one of Russia's most capable point defense systems against precision munitions, specifically designed to intercept threats exactly like this. Its missiles can engage targets from 1 kilometer to 15 kilometers away, at altitudes reaching 10,000 meters. From detection to launch, the system's reaction time is typically 5 to 7 seconds, with interceptors accelerating to Mach 3 within 2 seconds of leaving their vertical launch tubes. Against a normal ballistic target following a predictable arc, interception would have been almost guaranteed, but the Vilka-M was not flying predictably. At 22:42 hours, just as the Tor operator prepared to fire, the rocket's guidance system executed a pre-programmed evasive maneuver. The missile banked 15 degrees to the left while maintaining its descent profile. To the naked eye, the change was invisible, but on the radar screen, it was enormous. The maneuver pushed the rocket outside the Tor system's calculated intercept window, forcing the Russian fire control computer to discard its solution and begin calculations again. Frustrated and possibly panicking, the operator authorized an engagement anyway. 2 interceptor missiles blasted from the Tor launcher 30 seconds later. The first interceptor climbed aggressively toward the predicted intercept point, its radio command guidance system screaming for constant updates from the ground radar. But the Vilka-M's designers had spent years studying Russian air defense doctrine. At 22:42, the rocket performed another programmed maneuver, this time braking 20 degrees to the right, while adjusting its pitch slightly downward. The deviation added barely 300 meters to its total flight path, but it completely destroyed the Tor's intercept solution. Realizing the first pair of interceptors would miss, the operator switched to manual tracking mode. His display showed the target at 3,000 meters altitude, 18 kilometers downrange, with impact at the ammunition depot predicted in less than 60 seconds. He launched 2 additional missiles, simultaneously warning nearby air defense units. A Pantsir S-1 system, positioned 12 kilometers to the east, acknowledged the alert and began scanning its assigned sector. The second pair of Tor missiles performed significantly better. Their proximity fuses detonated within 50 meters of the incoming rocket. Fragments tore through the Vilka-M's aluminum skin, but the warhead casing and the missile's critical guidance electronics remained intact. The near miss did alter the trajectory slightly. Onboard accelerometers detected a 2-degree deviation, which the flight computer immediately corrected using its control canards. At that exact moment, the second Vilcum rocket entered the engagement zone, 30 seconds behind the first. The Tor crew, completely focused on the leading target, had not expected the second missile until 22:43. Now they faced a far more complicated situation. They had 4 interceptors remaining, and 2 maneuvering supersonic targets closing rapidly. Standard doctrine demanded prioritizing the closest threat, but engaging multiple maneuvering supersonic targets in the terminal phase pushed the Tor system beyond its real-world limitations. The Pantsir S-1 attempted to assist, but it faced a problem of pure physics. The Vilcum-M rockets were approaching from the extreme edge of the system's radar blind spot, forcing the massive turret to rotate 140 degrees while simultaneously calculating an intercept solution. By the time the Pantsir missiles were ready to fire, the leading rocket had already dropped below 500 meters, entering the terrain masking zone. At that altitude, terminal interception becomes extraordinarily difficult. Unless the Russian operators performed a miracle in the next minute, the missiles were now nearly unstoppable. At 22:49 hours, the leading Vilcum-M rocket entered its terminal attack phase, just 8 kilometers from the Kartisk ammunition depot. 4 separate Russian air defense systems converged their radar sensors on the incoming threat, flooding the sky with overlapping beams of electromagnetic energy. The next 45 seconds would determine whether months of Ukrainian intelligence preparation would succeed or collapse in a cloud of failed interceptions. The Tor M2 crew had one final opportunity. Their radar indicated the missile was now flying at 400 meters altitude, using a narrow ridgeline to mask its approach. In 15 seconds, it would clear the ridge and dive toward the depot. The operator programmed his final missiles for the predicted pop-up intercept point. His finger hovered over the launch trigger. 3 kilometers to the south, a second Pantsir S-1 battery finally joined the engagement. The system carried 12 radio command-guided missiles with an effective range of 20 kilometers. The crew had tracked the Vilcum-M since it descended below 1,000 meters, but intense ground clutter prevented a stable lock. Their radar cycled rapidly through multiple frequencies, attempting to burn through interference, much of it ironically generated by their own friendly jamming systems. Still no lock. The depot's final defensive layer was a ZSU-23-4 Shilka stationed along the facility's northern perimeter. Its 423mm autocannons could fire 3,400 rounds per minute, creating a dense wall of steel intended to destroy low-flying aircraft and missiles. The gunner rotated his turret toward the predicted approach vector. The radar-guided fire control system struggled to distinguish the incoming missile from the radar reflections bouncing off surrounding hills. At a closing speed of 300 meters per second, he would have barely 3 seconds to engage before the target entered the system's minimum firing range. At 22:49 hours, the Vilcum-M crested the ridge exactly where the Tor operator had predicted. Both remaining Tor missiles launched instantly. Their rocket motors lit the night sky as they accelerated toward the intercept point. The Vilcum-M's altitude had dropped to 380 meters and falling, following a terminal trajectory that would strike the depot in 12 seconds. The Tor interceptors had 8 seconds to reach it. But at that exact moment, the second Vilcum rocket appeared, cresting the same ridge 2 kilometers to the north. The Pantsir crew was stunned. A new threat had appeared on an entirely different azimuth. In a split-second decision that violated nearly every rule of air defense doctrine, they split their fire. Instead of concentrating their missiles on the primary target, they launched 357 E-6 interceptors at each incoming rocket. The panic-driven decision drastically reduced the probability of destroying either target. Their Mach 3 interceptors required 8 seconds to reach the rockets, but dividing the radar's attention between 2 maneuvering supersonic threats degraded the tracking solution beyond acceptable limits. Meanwhile, the lead Vilcum-M's warhead fully armed as the missile descended through 200 meters altitude. The final seconds had begun. The missile's impact fusing circuits activated as its radar altimeter delivered the final altitude corrections, completely ignoring the electronic noise roaring from Russian jamming systems below. On the ground, Russian ammunition handlers suddenly realized what was happening. Panic erupted across the depot. Workers abandoned forklifts loaded with 122mm rockets, sprinting toward cover as alarms echoed through the compound. They had been warned 30 seconds earlier, but relocating thousands of tons of volatile ammunition required hours, not seconds. At 22:50, the 2 Tor interceptor missiles streaked past the lead Vilcum rocket, passing within 30 meters of the target. That distance was normally close enough for their proximity fuses to trigger a kill, but the closing speed and extreme intercept angle pushed the system beyond its design limits. Both interceptors detonated behind the rocket, their fragmentation clouds expanding harmlessly through empty air while the supersonic projectile continued its terminal dive. The final defensive layer reacted instantly. The ZSU-23-4 Shilka opened fire at 600 meters. Its 4 liquid-cooled autocannons unleashed a torrent of tracer rounds, attempting to build a desperate wall of steel in the rocket's path. The gunner held the trigger for 2.5 seconds, expending nearly 280 rounds in a futile attempt to defeat pure physics. But the missile was already past them. Then, 20 seconds later, the third Vilka Merocket appeared. Approaching from the east, where air defense coverage was weakest, it used the confusion of the first 2 engagements to slip through the radar network almost unnoticed. Across the depot, emergency sirens screamed. Personnel sprinted toward reinforced concrete bunkers, structures that would offer absolutely no protection from what was about to happen. At 22:49 and 10 seconds, the lead missile's radar proximity fuse detected the warehouse roof 5 meters below. The warhead detonated instantly. Its 170-kilogram high-explosive charge unleashed an immense pressure wave that collapsed the warehouse's eastern wall in a single violent pulse. But that blast was only the beginning. Inside the building were thousands of tons of Russian ammunition, and they were about to ignite the most destructive fireworks display the Donbas had seen in years. At 22:49 and 15 seconds, the shockwave from the first explosion reached the nearest ammunition stacks. Pallets of 152mm artillery shells, stacked 4 meters high in clear violation of safety protocols, absorbed the blast. The shockwave compressed the air trapped between the wooden crates. Temperatures surged beyond 3,000 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. Within 300 milliseconds, the first secondary explosion erupted. What followed was a chain reaction. The warehouse effectively transformed into a directed energy bomb, blasting outward with devastating force. 30 seconds later, the second Vilka missile struck the northern storage building. Its warhead penetrated the reinforced roof before detonating among crates filled with BM-21 Grad rockets. Each 122mm rocket contained roughly 18 kilograms of solid rocket fuel. Under controlled ignition, it burns at 2,200 degrees Celsius. Under shock detonation, it explodes violently. The blast triggered nearly 600 rockets simultaneously. Their combined explosion lifted the 15-ton roof structure completely off the building and hurled it into the air like a sheet of paper. Then the third Vilka Mern arrived. At 22:50 and 20 seconds, it slammed into the western warehouse, targeting stacks of 9 M22U Grad rockets equipped with advanced warheads. These munitions carried not only explosive charges, but submunition dispensers designed to scatter anti-personnel mines across wide areas. The intense heat and overpressure triggered those submunitions inside their casings. The resulting detonation produced a devastating internal blast that collapsed the building's structural frame. Burning solid rocket fuel sprayed across the depot like liquid fire. It clung to vehicles, buildings, and equipment, burning fiercely even underwater. By 22:51, the spreading inferno reached the depot's most valuable stockpile. Stored inside reinforced bunkers were S-300 surface-to-air missiles in storage configuration. Each 5V-55 missile carried 133 kilograms of high explosive and a massive quantity of solid propellant within its sustainer motor. When the flames reached them, the resulting detonation was catastrophic. The blast wave shattered windows in Kharkiv city center, 3 kilometers away. Seismic sensors across the border even registered the explosion as a minor earthquake. Within hours, emergency orders from Moscow forced Russian commanders to disperse their remaining ammunition stockpiles across numerous smaller facilities. The decision dramatically reduced logistical efficiency. Convoys would now spend more time moving ammunition than firing it, and every new depot became another vulnerable target for drones, artillery, and partisan sabotage. Exactly the outcome Ukrainian planners had intended.